This is Radio Ecoshock with Alex Smith.
This is the Radio Ecoshock program, Warnings of the Russian Heat Storm. Well, welcome to Radio Ecoshock, broadcast on 22 college and community radio stations throughout North America, plus Green 960 AM in San Francisco. I'm Alex Smith. Today, we are reporting on the wild heat storm that happened in Russia in the summer of 2010, the fires, the drought, the deaths, the whole thing. As you know, in the summer of 2010, the world witnessed one of the great climate changes, the signs of climatic instability on a grand scale. The Arctic ice again retreated to record low levels. We had those unimaginable floods in Pakistan. There were heat records set all over the United States, especially on the East Coast and in the central United States. We had heat records, in fact, the highest ever recorded in 17 different countries around the world, and these were in Latin America, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Russia, and even in Japan, where they had a sizzler of a summer, something hotter than they've ever experienced in any recorded temperature measurements. Well, the harbinger, the messenger from the future, took the Russian people into uncharted hell. Moscow, at the latitude of Alaska, had the weather of Cairo, and the people were gasping for smoky air that was equal to 2 packages of cigarettes a day. Well, Russian leaders who bragged global warming could be good for the northern country, they got a little bit of taste of the future to come. Scientists are still debating about whether the abnormal heat in Russia was really caused directly by climate change. There are some meteorologists who say that there are mechanical conditions that were good enough to have caused that without having climate change. There are other climate scientists who say, well, this is exactly what we predicted, and here it is happening, so if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it must be that. Well, let's look and see what we can learn about how people and governments act under stress, about our vulnerabilities, and about the chances of survival for you and I and our families and our descendants. In the radio show, we go straight to Moscow talking with Vladimir Tchouprov of Greenpeace Russia, and you can get that by downloading our free MP3 of the radio show. I really recommend it. Tchouprov gave us some real insight into how many people in Russia, in fact less than 25%, don't believe in global warming at all or don't know about it because the state media hasn't been telling them much about it. But after these fires, a lot of people are Googling and looking things up and learning for themselves, and the number of people who believe that climate change is a serious problem has naturally gone way up. Now, we also follow that with another interview with an expat, Dmitry Orlov. He's the author of Reinventing Collapse, the Soviet Example in American Prospects, a great book, which he is now revising for republication, but I still recommend the old one. The book is just crammed full of ideas of how people get by when their economy and their political system utterly collapse. And there have been a lot of people in the United States who are wondering if that is happening to them, or even in Ireland or Iceland and other places. The UK is sort of teetering on the edge. So if we're going into a great economic depression, if things get very unstable, it looks like big federal governments can't do much about it. State governments are going bankrupt. Municipal governments may go bankrupt. They're cutting services. How are you going to survive? What are you going to do about it? You can learn a lot of that from Dmitry Orlov's book about how the Russian people survived their problems with things like kitchen gardens and barter and the black markets and, well, just a whole bunch of things that you need to read the book to get. Are you interested in your food supplies? We also, in that radio program, have a clip from Lester Brown, who's talking about the Russian ban of wheat exports. It's a major thing. They cut, Russia produces about 40 million tons of grain a year, and they're just not going to export any of it as they usually do. Many of their exports go to North African countries who now will have to scramble on world supplies. We should be okay for the year 2010 because there were some reserves from other countries, and other countries did manage to harvest their grains. But Lester Brown brings up the point that if this had happened in the Chicago area, if the Chicago area had had heat greater than 14 degrees above normal, and you'd lost a lot of the corn crop, there you're talking 300 million tons of grain. It could have been cut in half. If the world had lost 150 million tons of grain, or even 200 million tons, wow, we could be in big problems. And these are the sorts of things, or even if it had happened around the Beijing area where they grow 100 million tons of grain, these are the sorts of things we're going to find coming up as climate change develops, and it's going to have a big impact on agriculture. Was it global warming? Scientists seem to fall into three camps. There are those who just absolutely say it has nothing to do with climate change. Many of these are meteorologists, but some of them with real credentials, such as those from NOAA in Boulder, Colorado. We have a man named Martin Horling who says, well, it's possible if a weather system stalls for long enough that you could get this heat without the added impact of the greenhouse gases. Other scientists say this is exactly what the IPCC has been predicting for a long time, that extreme events would become more extreme, and so they're saying that although you can't exactly say this event was caused by climate change, this is certainly what we can expect for the future, so get ready. And that's why I've covered the Russian events with such detail, because I think that these are what we can expect to have coming up in the future. Now, in our next segment of this Radio Ecoshock YouTube version, I'm going to be covering 15 things that we can learn from the Russian experience that might help you to plan for a world that is warming, and then warming up some more, along with climate instability, storms, and floods. So be sure and tune in for that. Get our whole Radio Ecoshock show for September 3rd, 2010 by going to ecoshock.org. That's ECO shock, like an electric shock.org. And just look in our program archive. You can find it anytime and download it as a free MP3 download. All of our programs have no copyright. Go ahead and pass them on to other people and educate yourself. We've got 5 years worth of programs there. Help yourself. Ecoshock.org. Thank you for listening to our first segment.